In today's episode, I'm gonna talk about lenses. Lenses for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera especially. So come hang out. What's up? So gonna be talking about some lenses for, cameras in general, MFT and big SLR stuff or full frame, but this one in particular, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. What lenses am I looking for? Because I'm putting together like a set for this one, and I've been thinking long and hard, what lenses do I want to use for it? It's kind of difficult to know that before you start shooting and know how it performs, but I think in general I have most of the stuff that I want, but I'm just gonna go through because I ordered 3 vintage lenses just like yesterday, so that's gonna add to the vintage stuff I already have. And then I'm thinking about changing some stuff up. I don't have the speed booster for this camera. This is the old speed booster, but that's what I'm also thinking about. So let me know what you're thinking about as well in terms of like what you want in the MFT, or do you want speed booster like EF lenses? What's your preference? Let me know. But first of all, like, what do you even look for in a lens? And for me, like, I use the Ursa, that's what I'm shooting on now. That's the big camera. But when I use a camera like this, I don't want it to get big just because I'm using like big lenses. So even though like when I have it on the easy rig, for instance, I might be using the Sigma 18 to 35 with a speed booster. That's fine if you have like an easy rig and everything. But if you're using it on like a Ronin, or if you're using it handheld, it can become a little bit dreadful to be carrying it because this is a heavy thing. So then I've been thinking about like, what do I do to kind of make this as like mobile package, also a big package. It should be able to be an A cam, but also a B cam or just a small pocket cam. So it's a lot to think about. But in terms of what I look for in a lens, I think it's super important that they're light sensitive, because I don't have the opportunity to light all the time. Now I prefer to light things, but it's not always that I get to light. And then you need light sensitive lenses so you can cover your ass when you can't do it. But with that said, they should be sharp, or they should have a certain look to them. And sharp, the Sigma to like 18 to 35, very sharp, very nice lens. I love this one. That's why I ordered the speed booster as well, because I realized when we were in Iceland now shooting that this is the lens that would go on the camera if I was shooting like general stuff on an easy rig. This is a much nicer lens to work with, but I also want the lens to work with a follow focus on this one, because I just ordered the follow focus. So to be able to do that, it needs to be pretty light, because this gets heavy even with this lens. So the focus gear or whatever motor will sit right here, and then you will be able to just like do it with this one. Now, saving batteries, probably dumb, but still. So then the MFT lenses that I have that are like my base lenses, it's the SLR Magic, for instance. 12mm I think works really well on that one. I think 10mm is a little bit too wide for a lot of the stuff. And I actually think that the Voigtlander 10.5 might be a little bit better because it's light sensitive, but then like this one I don't use it as much as the 12 on this camera, so I'm not entirely sure which one I would go with. Since 12 is like a better all-round lens, but for vlogging 10 is fine. Pretty difficult to choose. But what you should look for is like sharpness, contrast, and also the look in a lens. And for instance, this one, which is the Helios, which model do I have? 44-2. This one is like an amazing lens. It has such a special character to it, that it's just a specialty lens that I use a lot of the time. But you don't want to use it on like the pocket cinema camera without a speed booster, because it gets too cropped in. So for the Ursa, I've used it with this dummy adapter, but I think I'm gonna have to try it out with the speed booster and see how it does, because it's just very different. But I think the speed booster, it's higher quality, because I see that Mark Oliver is talking about the price of Viltrox was a no-brainer. I've seen tests, I haven't tried it myself, the Viltrox, but I've seen that it seems to be a lesser of quality. And if you buy expensive lenses, like for instance the Sigma or something, then you don't want the adapter to be like ruining the sharpness or whatever you have in this. Or if you put cinema glass, for instance, on it, then that might be like the dumbest thing to have a cheap adapter, but then it would be like PL mounts and all that. It's a different thing, but still, like, you should think about that when you buy adapters and stuff, because even these, let me just screw this off. The adapters for this is, what are these called? It's the is it M42? Does anybody know? I think that's what they're called. The mount doesn't say. Those are just like a screw type of thing most of the time, and I don't think that's a problem, but sometimes it might be. Yeah, anyway. But I love the vintage glass, so having a lens like this, it's a perfect kit lens because it's super sharp. It covers the focal length that I'm interested in, which is pretty much like on a full frame or a super 35. They're gonna be in like the 18, 20, 24, 28 range, and then that can differ a little bit, but that would be like my go-to focal lengths. And outside of that, it might be like specialty lenses. But vintage glass is perfect for creating a cinematic look. So if you're after like cinematic look, you can look into like the Helios lens, but you can also look into the FD lenses that Canon has. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this, but there's so many that are like, they have a certain character to them. They might be a little bit softer, they might have a different contrast, they might have like a certain character that you can't get in new lenses, and they might have like much more lens flares, bunch of stuff that you can experiment with. But I just think that you should probably have a speed booster just because of that, because if you're like, say you're shooting MFT lenses most of the time, for instance this one that's on here, which is the 12 to 35 Lumix lens. This is a great like kit lens if you want to do MFT. It covers about the same as this one. So when I go like small camera, that's the lens that I would use. But then I would also have like these specialty lenses, which would be on an adapter, because most of the still lenses that you can buy vintage is old like full frame stills or still lenses. So I just think there's a bunch of them that you can try out, and I'm just gonna go through some of them today, but I think that you need to think about what type of character you want, because I'm into like the anamorphic look, but I don't shoot anamorphic that much, but I still want those types of lenses, which is pretty much what the Helios is. There's the Mir 1B, which I just ordered. There's I ordered a Makinon 24 millimeter, and we'll see how they do, because you have to kind of work with them on a full frame to get the most out of the bokeh, but you might be able to get enough if you have the speed booster. Yeah, so let me see if we have some questions here, but I would say as well, because I've worked with cinema glass, I would say that there's not that big of a difference, but it is like more suited to if you're working in a big team and you have a focus puller, all that stuff, then it really makes sense to have cinema glass. And also if you're changing lenses, you have the same size, so there is a purpose for that, but I'm not doing that type of productions that much. Most of the time when I've used cinema lenses, I've still been the one that has to focus them, so it hasn't made that much sense to have them. But they are like superior in certain areas, but I still think that this lens from Sigma is just as good as most of the glass. But you have on the other side of like the cinema lenses, you can get and rent like anamorphic vintage lenses or these super high standard lenses that you cannot own yourself, or you could, but you would be pretty tapped out and not have a house or anything. Those lenses are stuff that you rent. These lenses are stuff that you own. So it's a bit of a difference there. But yeah, let me see if we have some more questions here. I ordered the Metabones Ultra, and then I realized that I should have the XL, so we changed it. Just because the XL is made for the full frame lenses, and since I'm mainly looking to use them with vintage glass and the Sigma, it made sense to go with that one. Ordered my Helios, very cheap, and it comes with an adapter. Yeah, it's fantastic lens, no mistake there. Like it's something that I shot the commercials that we did now. We shot one in Turkey and then one in Iceland. I shot a couple of scenes where I wanted a certain style to them, or a feel of like intimacy and all that. I used that lens to achieve that, and that's what it's great for. You can really like nail a look with it straight away. And I shot like everything that was night scenes or with the family and that type of stuff, just to get a different look to those scenes than to the work that's a part of the rest of the documentary. It doesn't make sense maybe, but yeah, that's how I think about it. So you want to have those types of lenses. Some of these lenses, like this one for instance, the 50mm Fd lens, I've used this one so much for lens whacking, which is just because it's so compact, it makes like this amazing flares. Yeah, so if you haven't seen like lens whacking, it's just where you put this up to the camera, and then you just like go like this and get some light coming in, and that's an awesome effect that you can do. I used it for like the tidal sequence in the Pearl of Africa, for instance. Yeah, lens whacking. Okay, so have you noticed any vignetting using MFT lenses? My 25 Voigtlander just has a little at the edges. I haven't, because first I thought that the 10mm was doing that, but then I realized that I was doing something wrong, because then it wasn't. So I don't know why it did it. Maybe I was like not screwed it on. I don't know why, but it seemed like something was wrong, but then it wasn't. So I haven't noticed any vignetting yet, but who knows, maybe I'll discover it later when I'm reviewing more of the material. But I have shot a lot and I haven't experienced that at all, but I've mainly been shooting with a 12mm as the widest. So Benjamin Cortez Leon, hello. Personally, I'm looking for lenses that are manual aperture. Also, I've looked for zoom lenses with manual aperture, but I have not been successful. Clearly, all of a reasonable budget. I've heard good comments about Canon Fd lenses. Yeah, Canon Fd, like I use them so much on the full frame cameras and the Super 35. I think they're like great for that. All my lenses are EF adapted. So I have this one which is 50, I have this one that's 85, and I have one that's 135, I think. And all of them are like great lenses. Have a certain character to them that I don't know how to describe it, but there is like a different look to them than you have in the modern glass. I think they're a bit softer. It feels like it's more cinematic in my opinion, but who knows, maybe I'm all wrong. Another interesting thing is like you have these fake anamorphic things where people are like, they take apart the lens and then inside they put like a fishing line. They paint, like this one is painted, as you can see. They paint the inside to get a certain flare to them. This is a Pentacon 28. So this is just like an effect lens that gets these flares to them, and then like it has an anamorphic filter inside. So this is something that you can do as well as an effect type of lens, and you can buy them off of eBay where they adapt them for you. I think they're cool because it's just like a different type and style that you can just like play around with and see how well they do. But it's not as doing anamorphic, but it's just a look. So if you want to do effects, then that's one way of going. And I think this one, like, it has its purpose sometimes, but most of the time I stay away from it. Another thing that I thought about was to use my like compact Voigtlander lenses, because I have these 20, 28 and 40. I think 20 and 28 would be the ones that I would want to use. So when you have the speed booster, these are pretty sweet to have on the gimbal, because they're not so big, and because I think, not sure yet, but I think you can adjust the iris on these. So if you can adjust the iris and you can have the focus motor on the Ronin, then this is a nice size because it doesn't have to weigh all that much, and they're like a good small lens that you can use, because I think it's going to be hard to use this one. I'm just like, who wants to carry a heavy Ronin and this, and it just becomes very difficult in the end. But that I haven't tried, but it's just something that I'm thinking of exploring. I think though that the 12 to 35 is a really, like, it's a good lens to have on the Ronin, because it's so light, because you really want to get all the weight out of the way. And pretty much like 12 is fine to shoot. It's kind of hard when you're vlogging because you want 10 but can't get everything. This one is good though for that. Mark Oliver says, I saw some of those tests as well that makes the Viltrox looks horrible, but I didn't have the same issues. I just wasn't ready to spend that much on a Metabones. No, I can definitely understand that, because this is like, it's expensive. I don't even know, like this one, I've used it for like a lot of the time, but a lot of the time it also was just at home, because I started using it as the small form factor type of thing. So I don't even know how I will use it, but since I shot in Iceland with this one, I think if you want to shoot with it as an A-cam, then I think that you want a lens like the Sigma 18 to 35, just because it covers everything you want. But I think everybody should start shooting with prime lenses, because once you start using zooms, you get lazy. So I really think that anybody that's learning filmmaking should definitely focus on working with prime lenses, because when you work with prime lenses and have fixed focal lengths, there is a couple of things that you need to do. You need to learn the settings manually, which is great. You need to understand like the differences between the different focal lengths. That's super important as well. When you're just zooming, you don't even like think about what you have. Now I was changing this lens because I wanted this one. It usually sits on the Ursa, and I didn't even know what focal length I had. I had to check, and then I realized that it was the 24, and I have a Sigma 24, so I just switched them. But that's a thing that, like, when you've learned to work with prime lenses, it's fine to start using zoom lenses. But it's really important that you understand the differences between the focal lengths. So just working with primes is much better for that. But the most important thing is, I think, movement, that you learn not to just be like still and zooming, because that's really simple to start working like that, and that's not a good way to be working as a DOP. You really need to be moving with the subjects and really feeling and being more intuitive with your camera. And that, I think, is hindered when you work with zooms. Once you've learned that, like that type of movement, then it's fine to work with them. But I think that for anybody that's learning, don't like rely on zooms too much. Anybody like the Pentacon lens Turbo 2? I've had good luck with that. I haven't tried that one. Dale also recommends old Pentax Super Takumar. Super Takumar, I ordered a 28, I think now, just because I wanted a 28 that was sharp, and I think that they're really sharp. I think those are a really good alternative. But you also need to think about, when you buy vintage, you should really think about, like, okay, so where does the iris go? Because they go towards different directions on different mounts. So you have to think about, like, what type of lens are you most intuitive with. Like, if you use FD lenses, everything goes to the left. On different ones, they might go to the right. You have to think about that and try it out. And you don't want to buy like 1,000 mounts as well, or adapter mounts. So think about that before committing to like 10 different mounts. Have you tried the older Tokina 28-70 2.8? I haven't, but it seems awesome that they're based on the Argenix, I think, or the tech of Argenix. I've been looking at Tokina, but I think that focal length is not what I would go for. I'm much more into like the wider focal lengths. I do have this one, which is the 24-105 L lens from Canon, but I don't use it. I got it as a kit lens with my old 5D Mark II, and then I've just kept it because it's good to have that zoom, but I don't use it. It's too zoomed in for me, I think. But it's a really good lens. Mark Olivier, I've heard that XL won't work with the Pocket 4K because of the largest sensor. I've read a lot of different things about it, but as I understand it, Blackmagic has said themselves that is the one that they recommend for full frame. But I've heard that it has had, like, people have had troubles with all of them, and I don't know if it's like in the beginning or if it's the people that are using them or what's the deal, or if it's like them using the wrong lenses, because it's made for the full frame lenses. So I'm not sure. Like they're probably using the wrong lenses on the wrong Metabones adapter, because it seems like it's impossible. Like, I ordered the wrong one and then I had to change. So I would say that's the issue, but I'm not entirely sure. I might have ordered the wrong one still. What will you buy for your main video stills camera, GH5 or A7 III? I would probably go with the GH5S, but that's just because I don't like the look of Sony cameras in general, and I think that they compress it too much. I think that the GH5 that I have is okay. It also does some in-camera processing that looks like hideous if you look at the noise pattern around like 800 ISO and above. There's something weird going on with those cameras. But the GH5S is supposed to be more light sensitive, but I still think that they're doing similar processing. So I wouldn't like say that that's the best camera before trying it, because I haven't tried it. But I feel like you would be better off with a Pocket 4K or a Pocket Yeah, Pocket 4K would be better, and it's cheaper. Ross Bodeman, Canon Fd Olympus Suco, great super compact, Pentax K series, also compact, long focus throw, beautiful flares, vintage Tokina, great sharpness. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's like, it's a big factor to have like a certain character to your films. And when you start to put together your, like if you have a vintage set and you have like more modern stuff, like the vintage stuff is what's gonna make you like stick out in terms of how you use them as well. So when you start to play around with them and try to tell stories in a certain way, then I think they're awesome. Some lenses you can find that are really cheap and sharp, but for me, I would rather focus on the ones that are like specialty lenses that has a certain character that can help you like tell a certain story. Because for sharpness, like having these lenses, they're so freaking good that I can't imagine like anything competing with them. And you can't carry 1 million lenses, so you need to think about like how much are you going to fit in a bag and all that type of stuff as well. I usually just want to have like this one, maybe 12mm SLR Magic, and then the kit lens, which is like the 12-35, and then maybe a smaller like MFT lens, which is like a 15mm all-round type of lens. My wish now is that the 20mm with the Metabones speed booster would fill in the gap of this one, because I feel like this is not going to be very nice to have with the follow focus. So yeah, it comes down to what you're going to use it. Did you have to get shooting authorization in Uganda or Thailand? If yes, how? Like I shot a film about something that was totally illegal in Uganda, where people got murdered because of doing what I was shooting, so definitely no permit. So I moved with caution and everything, and I always had like the embassy on speed dial and that type of stuff. But I think like you need to be super cautious when you're shooting a certain type of stories. And you should like read up on everything that you can. Like preferably you should go these security type of courses that a lot of the journalists are sent to do. But I think if you can't access that, you can look at that online. For Thailand though, it was no worries at all. It was just like going around shooting with a small. Either I was shooting with in the town. I was shooting with the Canon Fd Mark III, and then in the hospital I was shooting with a pocket camera, old pocket, and I wasn't allowed to shoot like with the what was the rules? I was only allowed to shoot in the hospital in the room that they were in, but then I also shot them when they were going to surgery until they told me to stop. And I always live by the golden rule of it's easier to just ask for forgiveness than for permission, and that's the way that I've always worked, and it usually just works. Nobody is really like angry with you if you're not doing weird things. But like with Uganda, it's weird because I haven't seen like now one of the guys that we have as part of our film, The Confused African, he's being chased by the president and he's trying to murder him, for instance. And that is like a crazy thing that happens there, but somehow they don't even care about me when I made that film or whatever. I don't know. It's so hard, and it's so depending on like the situation, who are you and how are you coming in, what passport do you have. If you're Swedish, it's of course much easier than if you have a different passport. You need to think about a lot of things before setting out to do that type of film. I'm choosing MFT Prime manual cinematic lens for Pocket Voigtlander versus SLR Magic. I would say Voigtlander, if you want those focal lengths, because I think that they have like, I'm not sure, 17.5, 10.5, and then 25, I think. And all of them are more light sensitive than the SLR Magics, but they don't have a 12mm, and that's why I would choose this one. But for 10, I think Voigtlander is better because it's more light sensitive, and it's a lot more light sensitive. I'm thinking of getting that one, like getting rid of this one, getting that one, and getting the 17.5 from Voigtlander. But we'll see. That's not something I have to get, but it's probably going to happen if I keep using the camera, just because those focal lengths are missing. Yeah, I think that's basically how I think about it. Like, if you can have the 17.5, that pretty much like fits into where this small lens is. This is a great lens, but it's just very hard, I think, to use it on the follow focus. Now I will try, but it just has this very, like, you can screw it to infinity. I don't know how it will work. We'll see. Otherwise, it's nice to have it this tiny. MFT or full frame, I missed the conclusion. I think that for me it comes down to what type of kit do you want. Like, I really like the MFT lenses when I want to pack light. That's when I use them. So if you're doing that, then like MFT all the way. But if you have like a big setup, like when I use it on an easy rig, I'm always going to go for the full frame because it's more, like, these are nicer to work with. They're more reliable. And you have the vintage lenses that you can use if you have a speed booster, that is. Yeah, I really like those. Let's see here, because I have like my list of what I'm thinking. So I have, here we go. So what I have right now is like, as MFTs, I've got these two from SLR Magic. It's 12 and 10mm. These are both like amazing wide lenses. They're not super light sensitive. So in a way, I think that they are, like, they're good as an alternative to the 12 to 35 zoom, but they're not the like most light sensitive, because this is 1.6T. That's probably, I guess, 2 point something, not 2.8, I think, but almost. So it's not that big of a difference. And if you look at, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, so I usually go with this one when it's nighttime, which is 1.7, I think, and that's a nice like all-round lens. Those are like, this one as well then are my MFT lenses. I don't use much more than that. I do have other ones. I have like this 45 from Olympus. I have 20 from Lumix, but those are rarely being used. And I think that those lenses are sufficient most of the time in terms of like MFT. But if I'm doing like a bigger shoot and I'm going with a client, or I'm going on a big like production, I'm gonna bring bigger equipment, and then I'm gonna have the easy rig and everything. And then what I was looking at now was, okay, so how do I, if I want to shoot with a small form factor, how do I make the MFT kit better? And then I was looking at the Voigtlander 17.5 and the 10.5, because those I think would make the MFT kit better. But outside of that, I think that for me, I'm totally fine with what I have. But for EF, I felt like I had to like look at some more vintage glass, just because I love working with the Helios, and I just wanted a similar look but wider. So the Mir 1B, I think it is 37mm. I ordered that one, and I ordered the Canon 24mm, which is 2.8, and then the super moldy coated Takomar 35mm. So those are the vintage glass that I have, but I'm also thinking about Canon Fd 17mm and a Mir 10A. Those are the ones that I'm thinking of. And then outside of that, I showed you most of the stuff that I have that are like EF lenses. I also have this one, Samyang 35, rarely use it, but it's really nice to focus. And I think that that's gonna be like my kit pretty much. But I don't know if you have any more recommendations that I should check out. Let me know. But I just feel like all of them are like really good lenses, but I usually just take 4 lenses with me. So you're never gonna be able to bring in everything anyways, because you always need to like pack light and lenses are heavy. So the smaller they can be, the better for me most of the time. Ross Bodeman, some good random wide zooms that are vintage out there, like 10 to 28 Tokina ProMaster. Yeah, I'm wondering, like, how many of you have tried to work with the vintage zooms and can compare it to the Sigma? Because I feel like, can they really stack up, and can they be worthwhile using as just like how they are built? I'm not sure. Like, I'm not entirely convinced that it's gonna be better, but maybe they're super cheap. Voigtlander 25mm started to produce vignetting at 1.2 on the Pocket 4K. Okay, so that's interesting, because how can that be? Is that the lens then, or because 25 seems super weird that it would be doing that. Let's see. Okay, I always turn down always take off the variable ND if you're trying to look at. Okay, and maybe it is vignetting at like 12, this one, but I'm not sure. This is not a very good test. No, maybe a little bit. I rarely see it because I shoot 235 all the time. Where do I get this away? Clean feed. No, I don't think it's vignetting actually. Okay, I need to try it out some more. But it seems very weird to me that a 25mm would be doing that. It must be the lens itself that does it, not the camera, I feel. But I'm not sure. That's just me like speculating. I would love to finally get to test the Pocket Cinema camera. I have a GH5, Meta XL and Sigma Art 14, 24, 50mm, Canon 40mm, 70 to 200mm L. Been very happy. Been extremely happy and want to test 12-bit RAW. Yeah, you definitely like try it out. I think that on the GH5, like GH5 is amazing in good conditions, but it's so often that it just like, oh, I'm so regretful that I use it when it's not the ideal conditions. That doesn't happen with the Pocket, I feel. Now, I had some issues with shooting in RAW. I don't think you should shoot in RAW, just because the ProRes HQ is much cleaner. It's much more using like an advanced technology that Blackmagic Raw is using for doing noise reduction, but it's not compressing it so much that you start losing detail, like for instance the GH5 is doing. So even with ProRes HQ it looks really good, or I would say it looks better, of course, so it looks amazing. Okay, I'm about to shoot my first doc, so should I concentrate on story and ignore all the other stuff like cinematic look, lenses, focal lengths, or is everything important? Everything is super important, but story is always most important. But if you are, for instance, doing an international doc and you want it sold, and you want to have like an international appeal, or if you want a film to be cinematic, if that's like your preference in terms of style, then you should definitely focus on that. But you need to take the time to really focus on the story first, and then from the story develop the other stuff. I actually made a video today about script writing, I think. And I think that I always come back to like, so once you've done all the research, once you've started to shoot, you still need to develop the cinematic language for every film, and that comes down to also picking equipment and how you're gonna do it, and trying to like create a look to it that helps to tell the story. So I think everything goes hand in hand. Your opinion on rocking on cine lenses? I think that for me they don't make sense. Like they seem to be decent, but they don't make sense because it's like I would rather rent the best lenses than owning those, because I know that they would just sit on a shelf for me. But there's nothing wrong with them. But I just think that they're not better than the Sigma 18-35 in terms of sharpness and quality and everything. So I wouldn't want to carry around like big ass lenses instead of this one. That's my biggest thing that I have against them. In terms of the rest, like they're fine as lenses, but they're not as, you know, using the ultra primes or using whatever you can rent is gonna bring another level to like the money you spend on buying those is not gonna be the same as in terms of quality of the stuff that you could rent if you're renting a lens kit. Maybe you can afford 1 or 2 lenses, but then rent those and go with like those that are like Cook lenses, for instance. Those are so sought after that I think that those makes more sense to rent than to own. I've always rented the cinema glass. Has the Pocket 4K come out yet? Yeah, I wonder if the first ones that got it had it like a month and a half ago or something. I've had it for a month or so. I think maybe 2 months they've had it. As for the vintage wides, there's the odd gem Pentax super multi-coated 40mm Pancake 2.8, nice look. K-Show, I was gonna suggest you go for the Sigma Art 14mm since it's such a unique lens, one of my favorites, but it's not a vintage nor light. I think for me, like the 14, I've looked at that one. I think that makes sense for anybody that is like using bigger lenses and are fine with carrying them. I only have like the obstacle of actually wanting to fit so much stuff in my bag. Like it's always overpacked. So I can't have like the 24mm art lens, for instance. I don't bring it just because this one covers that and it's as good, I feel. So for 14, it's a little bit wider. It's probably like this one, and this one is lighter. So I would just carry this. That's just, it's so complicated to get everything down in a bag. That's the thing you always struggle with. Mark Olivier, I had issues with my Sigma 18 to 35mm with the Viltrox 0.71. Ended up finding out that it was my damn lens hood. Felt pretty dumb about it. Yeah, that it happens so often though, that there's like these weird things, like for instance when you use filters and all that, you always need to check, like there's always something that might go wrong when you start adding things. When do you think Blackmagic is going to implement Blackmagic RAW into Pocket 4K? I'm not sure, but they've done like one update. Maybe I should check, because I haven't been checking, but they've done like one update for is it this one? The RAW update? I think they've done one, right? Public beta. And that one was really a small update. I feel like they will probably do like one or two more before they do it. They do a lot of like beta testing before they actually put stuff out. Yeah, so November was the last time, so 14th of November. If we're lucky, beginning of next year. But you never know, they just release stuff and they don't say anything about it. It just pops up on their website. Sorry about the RAW problems. Either way, I'll be waiting for Blackmagic to add the Blackmagic RAW to the camera before buying. I'm fond of the possibility of lighter codec and flexibility of RAW. Yeah, the thing is, like when you shoot in RAW isn't, there's no noise reduction. So if you have RAW in other cameras, they would look the same, I think. If you look at the RAW footage that would be in a GH5 or in a GH5S, it would look the same. It's just a RAW file that's coming from the sensor, so it's just that factor of not having noise reduction. But because Blackmagic RAW has such a good noise reduction algorithm that you can see now in the Ursa or in the Pocket Cinema camera if you're using the ProRes files, because that's using the same algorithm. So if you're looking at that material, it looks so much better and so much cleaner. So for me, it doesn't make sense to use the RAW because of that, because the ProRes HQ looks much better, and I don't think you gain anything of using RAW. Because you're doing a better job in camera reducing the noise than you're doing when you get into Resolve, and it takes a ton of effort to remove everything in terms of like power of the computer and all that. Yeah, I'm gonna talk more about that in the review that I'm releasing this week of the camera, but it's not an issue with the RAW. Like the RAW is not bad, it's just that RAW is not noise reduction, or it doesn't have noise reduction, so it makes it a little bit unfair to compare it to the algorithm that it's using, because it's had noise reduction onto it. And I think because it's MFT, it looks a little bit more noisy than, for instance, the Ursa does if you're shooting RAW, because it's a smaller sensor and it's more prone to have noise. But I still think like this as ProRes, I'm just amazed how clean it is, because it looks better than the Ursa in my opinion. It looks cleaner because you have higher ISOs that looks cleaner, like the 400 and down to 100 looks pretty similar. But when you're going up, that's where this camera becomes a better or superior camera, to me at least. Yeah. Which adapters do you recommend to buy, for example, if you wear FD lenses or any vintage? Buy adapter to Canon and then use with Metabones. In that case, it's better to have a Metabones 0.71. According to Blackmagic, according to me reading it on the Metabones website, I think, I'm not sure, they recommended the XL for full frame lenses. All the vintage glass that I have is full frame, so for me it made sense to get the XL because of that. That makes, you know, the Ultra a gamble for me, because they haven't said that, you know, what's the issue. If you buy the Ultra, what's the issue there if you use full frame? I haven't seen anybody talking about it, and I don't have it, so I can't try it, but there seems to be that issue of like, okay, so those lenses are better suited for that adapter. I think that has to do with the crop factor as well, probably. But yeah, I can't really answer like which one is the best. But I would say for me, it makes sense to have the small like lens screw-on things like this one, or like the small ones. This is the adapter for M42. Was that what we were saying it was? And then this is like just a dummy MFT adapter. But then for these I adapted, like these were custom made to be EF made. So this is the FD lens that was like adapted to EF. So it's a native EF mount. I think when you do this, it's more expensive, and it's not certain that they work, because this one I've had a lot of trouble with, but these two have worked perfectly. I did break this one though in an old video, like the chip fell off. So I would say it's not worthwhile getting stuff like this that's more expensive. Less simple things usually work. But sometimes the distance from the sensor might have a place. So you need to check that for the different mounts, because sometimes you won't be able to focus Infinity, or Infinity would be like a little bit before Infinity when you have certain adapters. So that's something to just look out for. How are you powering your Pocket 4K? Alex, big fan all the way from Cumbria in the UK. Mainly the batteries. I'm actually showing you the other way that I'm powering it in Iceland this week, so check that video out. But mainly I think that I will use it on the Ronin. I did buy a cable. Where'd it go? Here we go. Woo! Almost got wet. My feet got wet. This cable. Damn it. Tea all over my feet. This cable is from the Ronin. It's actually, I cut it off, but it has 3 cables, and I don't really know how to solder them together or to get them to work. So I was trying to do this, and I tried to contact them. They didn't recommend me doing it, so I stayed away from it. I think that they will release one later on that might work, because I want to power it from that. You can power it with a dummy battery, but I don't want to have the dummy battery and have it open and all that. I'd rather use it with the internal battery. But I do have a different setup with like D-type cables that I'm gonna show you in the video, which is the review from Iceland this week. Now, you can't really see it, but there's a big mess here, so I probably need to go clean this up. And yeah, if I don't see you guys before Christmas or after or whenever, take care and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Otherwise I might do like I want to try doing this one, a live stream with this. I might try that, but I'm not sure if I try it now or after like New Year's. But anyway, take care. I gotta go clean this. Thanks for watching. Bye bye. Wrong computer.